What was a series of acts passed by Parliament beginning in 1651 that established the basic mercantile policies for the colonies? Alright, first up, this is not part of the homework, but what is like mercantile theory? Like, what is that? Anybody know from reading it with your homework?
Trading.
A little bit more detail than that.
Merchants trading.
Not quite, mercantile. Or mercantile, that's what some say it. Not quite, alright, we'll go over more.
Trade
But
stores?
basically, units exist for the good of the mother country, so you're trying to generate wealth for the mother country. So in the colonies of America, you're existing to get money for England or Britain. And that's the reason why colonies started to get kind of unhappy, because they said, we don't like this. So, alright, is it a question about you're ready for it?
No.
You may have it.
The Navigational Act established mercantile policies.
Good job. Number 4, who became the king of Great Britain in 1760? Alright, Ethan.
George III became king in 1760.
Good job. And good complete sentence.
Who was he king of?
No, we gotta keep going. Number 6. What is the meaning of no taxation without representation? Frickin'!
I said it means like to raise revenue for income. I don't know.
Okay, no taxation without representation.
Got it.
Alright, Genesis, let's do Genesis.
That's not that one.
I said the meaning no taxation without representation is to raise revenue.
Let's try Chris.
Excuse me.
No taxation without representation, and no taxing the vulnerable without representation.
I'll take that. So, did we feel like we were represented in Parliament?
Yes.
No, because of how Parliament is structured, we felt like that none of the Americans were sent over to go to Parliament. So we said we don't have a voice. Just because they're English in Parliament doesn't mean that they have our interest in heart. We're too different. We need to send over Americans to be part of Parliament. Alright, number 10. Why was the repeal of the Stamp Act not a real victory for the colonies? Alright, Chris, what you have?
The Stamp Act being repealed led to a worse act.
Alright, what was it?
I don't know the name of it, but I know it was, we pretty much, England owned us now.
Yeah. Okay, so Declaratory Act. Basically declaring, saying, hey, okay, yes, let's get back off, but you're still subject to us. So it's basically okay, take it away, but now we're trying to officially bring you other, which doesn't really do anything because the colony. Make sure you're not getting distracted, Ethan. So, but it was the idea at the time. They're just trying to basically assert their authority over us. All right, do you have a question about the homework? That's our hand a second. Just want to make sure. All right, you can go ahead and put that away. We took our states and capitals. Did I skip 8? Who are the Sons of Liberty? I'm sorry. I appreciate it, but let's give the other people a shot. I appreciate you've done like 3. All right, anybody else want it?
I'll do the next one.
Okay, Chris, you can have it.
Samuel Adams made the Sons of Liberty, which held protest.
All right, Samuel Adams, and who was the other guy?
John Adams.
Good job.
I didn't have that on it, but yeah.
Okay, so it is John and Samuel Adams. All right, now you put that away. We're going to start going over your second round for states and capitals. It's the second half now. So your second half will be in about 2 weeks. So don't forget Labor
Why
Day.
does it have to be that long?
It's because some people do not learn them in elementary. So we're trying to help out the people so that way they can start getting for it. So you can still use the same links and the same games to help yourself to learn them. Alright, so let's read through them a couple times. Those of you that know them, make sure you're still freshening yourself, or maybe double check spelling so that way you will be able to get a perfect score on the next one. Whichever one did well on this one, but just make sure if you want that perfect score to double check your spelling for it. Alright, let's go through it. Ready? Begin?
Where to start?
Montana. Alright, so ready? Begin. Montana, Helena. Nebraska, Lincoln. Nevada, Carson City. New Hampshire, Concord. New Jersey, Trenton. New Mexico, Santa Fe. New York, Albany. North Carolina, Raleigh. North Dakota, Bismarck. Ohio, Columbus. Oklahoma, Oklahoma City. Oregon, Salem. Pennsylvania, Harrisburg. Rhode Island, Providence. South Carolina, Columbia. South Dakota, here. Tennessee, Nashville. Texas, Austin. Utah, Salt Lake City. Vermont, Montpelier. Virginia, Richmond. Washington, Olympia. West Virginia, Wisconsin, Madison. Wyoming, Cheyenne. Yeah, that last one is an Indian word. That's why that one's pronounced a little bit differently. Yes, Genesis. Yes, go.
She got solutions.
Yeah, go. Alright, let's go through it one more time and then we'll move on. We don't have a ton of review yet, but I do want to go over this one more time. So, starting at Montana. Montana. Go through them again. Ready? Begin.
Montana, Helena, Nebraska, Lincoln,
Nevada,
Carson
Anderson,
City, New Hampshire, Concord, New Jersey, Trenton, New Mexico, Santa Fe,
New York, Albany,
North Carolina, Raleigh, North Dakota, Bismarck, Ohio, Columbus, Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, Oregon, Salem, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, Rhode Island, Providence, South Carolina, Columbia, South Dakota, Pierre, Tennessee, Nashville, Texas, Austin, Utah, Salt Lake City, Vermont, Montpelier, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, Richmond, Washington, Olympia, West Virginia, Charleston, Wisconsin, Madison, Wyoming, Cheyenne. Alright, so we're going to do the palm game just because really fast. I don't have a lot of time to definition yet. What? What? Nope, I don't know who's gonna be. Alright, so first person to raise your hand after I answer the question. You get it right, you get the point.
You want me to not do it so they actually have a chance this time?
No. Do your best. If you're not gonna move, you better be writing down stuff. Which that reminds me, certain person, if you're not moving, you better should be writing down. Because you can't just sit there. Alright, so thinking back over it.
Just be purposely slow.
Why?
You do. So I can
I'm not purposely slow, I'm just slow.
Alright, what is the decade for the Great Awakening? I didn't say go yet. Go sit down quickly. Hurry.
I'm gonna show you some real speed.
Nope. What is the decade for? The Great Awakening. Go.
Fate.
It was Ethan actually.
1730, 1740.
Good. Who had the most power? What do we say is the most powerful voice of the Great Awakening? Not just because he could speak loud, but because he also influenced a lot of people. Go. Okay, that was Ethan. I mean Chris.
George Whitfield.
Good job. Who do we know as colonial America's foremost theologian and one of the greatest intellects America has ever produced? Go. Okay, that was Chris again.
What was the last name start with?
E.
E?
E.
What's the first name start with?
No, we're not gonna do this.
It's James, right? His last name starts with an E.
Mm-hmm.
Edwards. Edwards.
What? First name.
Excuse me.
Jonathan Edwards is correct. Jonathan Edwards. Alright. Who preached the dangers of an unconverted ministry? Who was that guy? Go. Okay, that was Ethan.
Let's start with
His last name begins with T.
Tyndale.
Nope. Chris was next.
Trenton.
Williams is his dad, right? Or
William is his dad.
And it's like George Trenton?
Nope.
Tenant.
What's his first name?
William.
That's technically the father. Alright, Brecken.
I just knew the last.
Okay, we'll let you have it since you got last name. Gilbert Tennant. Gilbert Tennant. Gilbert Tennant.
Gilbert.
Alright. Who preached sinners in the hand of an angry God? Go. Okay. I think it was Ethan and then barely Chris.
Jonathan Edwards.
What was it?
Jonathan Edwards.
Who's Jonathan?
Jonathan.
There you go. Jonathan Edwards. Who was the first African American or black female writer in America? Go.
Fate.
That was Chris.
Oh, you kidding me.
What one?
What was the last name?
It starts with W.
I know
Her
it.
last name starts with a W?
Yeah, her last name starts with W.
Rebecca White.
Nope.
Phyllis Wheatley.
Good job. Alright, who
Phyllis.
remembers?
Phyllis
Phyllis
Wheatley.
Phyllis Wheatley.
Finally.
Alright, if it helps you to remember the spelling, okay, but be careful. So Phyllis Wheatley. Alright, who is remembered as the best known missionary to the Native Americans in this time period? Go.
Me.
Alright.
David Brainerd.
David Brainerd. Alright, name one of the four colleges. One. I just need one that came out of this great awakening. So, name one of the four colleges. Go.
Oh, I was on.
I think it was Genesis or
Princeton.
Yep, Princeton, Brown, Rutgers, and Dartmouth. Those are the
I was
four.
gonna give all four, but you know.
I'm sorry, I only know for one.
Okay, good.
Oh.
Alright, let's see. Alright, what was the name for the 7 Years' War in America? We didn't call it the 7 Years' War, we called it something else. Go.
Fate.
That was Chris.
Are you kidding?
Isn't it?
Yep.
What's
F.
Come on.
French Indian War. French Indian War. Alright, who did Robert Dinwiddie send to go tell the French at the Fort Le Boeuf, I believe that's how you say that, I'm not good with that word, that they need to leave, but then they didn't. But he was smart and he looked around to see, and he was basically a spy inside the fort. Go.
Fate.
It wasn't him.
George Washington.
George Washington. Alright,
Your mom.
who proposed? Okay, make sure you're not getting too
I've heard my
far out there. Alright, Who proposed the Albany Plan?
Ooh,
Go.
Me.
that was me.
What's Christmas just is next?
Benjamin Franklin.
Okay, make sure you answer the question before you write down your point. But yes, it was
Oh,
Benjamin Franklin. Yes.
A reliable polar bear.
Yes.
Cool.
Who?
Paul.
Oh,
Bear.
here.
Alright, why did nobody besides Benjamin Franklin really like the Albany Plan? What was the problems with it? Go.
Me.
Yeah, that was even. It didn't.
Why didn't no one like cut
Yeah,
that?
the Albany Plan. There was like England didn't like it for a reason.
Because
And we
England-
didn't like it for a reason.
England didn't like it because they didn't want the colonies to unite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They didn't want the colonies to unite.
Why didn't we like it?
Because of the religious paramount.
If
No,
someone else
wait.
can make it,
We didn't like it because of the additional taxation. That, you know, that's right.
Okay, I'll take it. We will be giving taxation powers to Parliament. That's what we said, we don't like this. We don't like someone else having the authority over us. So
Okay,
that's
six.
why we didn't like it. Alright, what was the major difference between the proposed Albany Plan and the Dominion of New England? If you remember what Dominion of New England is. If you don't remember what Dominion of New England is, that's unfortunate. Go. That was Chris.
The Dominion of New England. The Dominion of New England. Two things. Didn't they have a set religion? Was that one of them? Also, weren't they already ran by a representative from England? So they wouldn't be a colony anymore if they did the Albany Plan.
I'm not sure where you're going with that, because
So I get the
based,
point, right?
no, because based on what you described, that's not the Dominion of New England. Who is in charge of the Dominion of New England? Word it that way, try to help them drug and everything.
Andrews?
Andros. Now who forced the colonies all together for it?
Who forced the colonies
Mhm.
together, like as one person?
Yep.
King.
Yes. Okay. So with the Albany Plan, were we being forced together, or were we being voting on it and volunteering to like vote on where we're going to be all together? Okay, so that's the difference is that Dominion of New England was forced upon us while
Someone
the
said
Albany
that.
Plan was volunteer. You got around to it, so now you make your point. Alright. Alright, who was the general that insisted whenever they attacked the French fort? You can actually see it down. Oh, never mind. It's so dark. That whenever he attacked the fort, Ducan, that he insisted on marching in neat rows, even though George Washington and the other colonists said, we don't do that here. He insisted on doing it here, and he died. Go.
Me.
That was Ethan.
Braddock. General Braddock.
Yep. So, Edward Braddock. So, make a note. Make a note down here. So, Lord Ducan down here, Braddock's defeat, died.
Ticonderoga?
What?
What's that?
What?
Ticonderoga.
I'm
Is that a pencil or something?
Yeah, sometimes Ticonderoga.
I don't know. Alright, so I think that's as far as we got yesterday and Monday.
Not one.
Points.
Anyone have 5 or more? I was expecting. Alright, 6 or more?
There's no way he has 6.
I had 7.
Are you being honest?
I've been
We're
dead
gonna-
serious.
we're
I
gonna be
counted.
honest.
Dead serious.
We're going off with what they say.
Dead serious.
I'm not keeping track. You're in June.
I'm not lying. Dead
You're
serious.
juniors.
I counted 7.
You have to be honest. So Ethan, you swear you got 7.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
Lord, no.
I swear. No, I know. I did it in my head. 1, 2, 3,
Alright,
4,
we're
5, 6,
going
7.
off what people are saying because you
I
have to
swear
be
I'm not
honest
7.
for it. But I'm not keeping track. You're in June. If you're gonna cheat to get candy.
That's kind of so.
Buy your own candy.
I don't even like Jolly Ranchers that much.
Okay, well let's get into it then. Alright, so page 57, that's where we left off. So this is the map that's on your page as well for it. So just make a note that Fort Ducan down here, and again, you're going to point out there was a lot more battles and things happening. We just don't have time. Your books are already long enough. So that's part of the reason why we just just the major ones for it. So Braddock, keep taking note of him. General Edward Braddock, he died. So just make a note for him. I feel slightly bad that he died, but at the same time he was stupid. So kind of other people needed to be in charge. So William Pitt the Elder, he was the person placed in charge of the war effort at this point. So he was saying, okay, we need to do something a little bit different. This isn't working. We need to listen to more of what the colonists are saying over how to fight up here. So we need to work with them a little bit more. But the general for us was James Wolfe. It's not George Washington. A lot of people assume it's George Washington. No, George Washington is only like 21 at this point, maybe 22. So because of that, no, he is still considered a minor officer. Now, with the War for Independence, now he will be a general, but not yet. So just keep in mind, this is the French and Indian War, so he's not a general yet. So it's James Wolfe, making a note on page 57. It looks like Wolfie, because again, a lot of English names have an E stuck on the end, but it's Wolfe, so just pick up with that. There's a quick question about this. Okay.
Why didn't the French advance any that much
Wait, what?
on the map? Why did
Well,
the
keep
French
in-
advance that much?
Why did they advance that much? Why did they
that
not advance that
Why
much?
did they not advance?
Alright, so who had more people in North America? British or French?
British.
British. So that's the reason why we can move around way more for it. Now keep in mind, they have the Native Americans helping them at their battles, but we are basically trying to get them to leave what we would say is our territory and trying to push them back and push them out. Also keep in mind who controls the high seas, British or French?
British.
British. So that's probably the reason why they can't get reinforced troops either, is because they're kind of stuck with whoever's here. Alright, but good question though. Alright, so one of the major battles was at Quebec. Now remember, what was special about Quebec? Here's this.
That it was founded in 1608.
Good job, that works. It was also a major city for them. So this, on this location on the St. Lawrence River, was a major fort, and they could defend it really well. Because could you bring supplies all the way down here if you had the enemy's fort right here?
No.
Probably.
Why? How, Chris?
Just
Oh.
go past the fort.
But if the fort is on the cliff overlooking the river,
But cannons.
Go further down the river.
how?
Walk.
So if the river is like this, fort is here. You would say, get your supplies, go over here, and then go back over.
Wait a second.
No, you go further, like where you are. Get off the boat. You use your arms and your leg, and you walk around to the fort.
Go in this direction.
Further around. Further.
What's the problem?
Right there, and just keep going
What's
down.
the
They can't see you
So
right
you're
there.
Cannons!
saying go all the way around this section.
Not that far necessarily.
Yeah, they said it's too much work, so they're not doing it. Plus, they had a lot of their supplies up in here. Keep in mind, the French territory is more so in Canada, so that's the reason why they said, no, I'm not going around. Plus, they would notice, hey, looks like they're unloading. Go attack them. And so they would notice and do things like that as well. So they would keep aware. That's the reason why controlling the rivers is really important, because it was the easiest and fastest way. Going this direction through the woods would take forever with supplies. So that's part of the reason why rivers are important. Now, we're going to see later on, in the Civil War, railways is what becomes super important. So, it just depends. At the time, this was the fastest way to move your supplies, was the river. So, controlling the river was super important. So, the Battle of Quebec, or the Siege of Quebec, is super important. So, it was located high on a cliff above the St. Lawrence River, and it was secure against direct attacks. So, that was part of the reason why they basically hunkered down there. They decided, the people in Quebec said, hey, we're going to just hunker down and wait for winter to strike, because once winter hits, the Americans are going to have to pull back and go back down south. Why do they think that the Americans would have to go back down south once winter hit up in that area? Somebody tell me though. Alright?
I think we were used to the cold.
Yeah, because remember, this is kind of up in Canada, and it's cold, and no one likes to camp out surrounding a city in cold weather. It's not fun. Laying siege is not fun on a good day, and so laying siege during cold weather is worse. So that's part of the reason why he said, okay, if we just wait till winter happens, they will have to leave to go get supplies, because no one wants to freeze to death just because you're laying siege to a city. So it wasn't a bad strategy. So the American general at the time, James Wolfe, he decided, okay, we're going to do something a little bit more daring. So they had the British ship and their fleets up here at the St. Lawrence River, and they're trying to take Quebec, the fort up in this section. Because it was so narrow here, they couldn't really go down here. So they had British batteries, or basically cannons over here, trying to fight against it. But they had their French entrenchments, or their defenses, even all the way up here. So you'd have to go way up here and go way around. So that's part of the reason as to how come they couldn't do that, because it was just too hard. So Wolfe's camp was up here. So he said, okay, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to try to go down and come up from this direction. This direction is called the Plains of Abraham, but it's not plains. This is actually really steep up in this section. But they said, okay, we're going to try to climb up this section and attack from this way. All right, Ethan.
What are British batteries? Is that cannons and stuff?
Yeah, it's like cannons and like trenches and like basically, I don't know what it's called, like a wall to like protect yourself. Alright, so he said, okay, we're going to go up this direction. This actually worked, because they did not think that someone would be stupid enough to climb up the cliff behind them, and he actually did it. He made it up to the top. Now, He unfortunately died during the battle, so James Wolfe and Montcalm, the general in charge, so Montcalm, making up this is the French general, both of them ended up, as your book points out, being mortally wounded. That means that you got shot, but you didn't die instantly, right at the moment. You typically bled to death later on from it. So they were both mortally wounded, so they got wounded, and then they died from it later on. But Wolfe ended up capturing Quebec. So do make a note that James Wolfe, he captured Quebec, but Wolfe and the other general both ended up dying, but Wolfe accomplished what he set out to do and captured Quebec. Alright, anyone have any questions about this? Alright. Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading. Alright, so let's talk about the Treaty of Paris of 1763. Alright, you need to know specifically the date for this Treaty of Paris. So it's 1763 because there's a bunch of treaties of Paris, treaties of Paris, so that way you will know which Treaty of Paris we are talking about. So I'm making it specifically, this is the Treaty of Paris of 1763, so you know which one it is. Alright, there were 3 major accomplishments for it, so let's go through it. Alright, Franklin, we'll let you read that first one.
Accomplishments?
Like 3 things that came about from it.
France surrendered Canada, except for 2 small fishing islands and all of her territory east of the Mississippi River, except New Orleans to the Great River.
Alright, so here's the map that your book shows you. I'm leaving like before and after for it. So this is how the New World territory was divided up originally. So this was the French territory, here's was the English territory, and then here's the Spanish territory. So once you had that treaty happen, they basically gave this section of land to England. Spain gets some, we'll talk about why Spain gets some in a minute. Oops, back the direction. But they lost a huge chunks of their land. This is part of the reason as to how come you don't go to war unless you know you're going to win. Because the typical consequence of war is, because since war is expensive, typically you paid it back in land and territory. So if you were on the losing side, typically you had to pay the winner in territory and land. So the English said, you lost. So we want this section of land. We want this territory back. So that's why they got basically all this section back from it. I keep going wrong direction, please. Alright, let's look at number 2. Genesis. Alright, read the next one and then I'll answer it.
New Orleans and the French territory west of the Mississippi were granted to Spain. Spain took over having entered the war as an ally of France.
Yeah, so Spain came over to try to help France, but since France lost, Spain said, hey, we helped you out. We came to help you. I mean, you still lost, but we came to help you. So France said, okay, in order to reward you for helping us, you can also have territory and land from it. So that's why you see a lot of the Spanish get this half of the section of North America. That was basically their compensation of, you tried, and you came and helped us, and we appreciate it. So you may have this territory for us, and for coming and trying to help us out. That's how come Spain got a lot of territory. Alright, so did that answer your question? You got another one?
We should do that today.
Did you do what?
Like with wars, not like today, but recently, and how they would pay with money or land.
With the types of wars that are today, that's one reason, okay, like with the Civil Wars, how come there was so much anger? Because there was no, like, land won. There's just a lot of death from it. With World War I, it was basically, you're saying, okay, these countries go back to your land, this country go back to your land, this country go back to your land. Everybody stay in your sections and stop trying to go over into other countries. They also tried to make the smaller countries be more independent. Unfortunately, Russia said, smaller countries, we can take these over. So that's how it led into the led into after World War II with the Cold War. So today, because people try to have different people groups be responsible in their own countries, they basically carve up, if you have a large nation that's invading other nations, if that country loses, they basically chop it up into smaller nations to basically keep it from growing powerful again. It's a little bit of a different mindset, but occasionally, because all the land is dibbed now, there's not a lot of people giving away their territories of land anymore, because the people living there will protest if they don't like being given away to another country. So we don't really see that happening a whole lot today, since so much of the land is dibbed in the world today.
Like Antarctica.
Yeah, even Antarctica. Russia's claimed so much Antarctica, which is kind of ridiculous because Russia's way up north and doesn't even need Antarctica, but they're claiming it, they're dibbing it. Alright, so as a side note, you also notice that Russia is also claiming up here. Now, we're going to talk about why Russia's claiming up here at this time period, but let's read that last let's read that last consequence or that last contribution of what happened with the Treaty of Paris. Alright, Ethan, read it for me.
Spain was forced to cede Florida to Great Britain at the expense of being invaded.
Yeah, so they got a lot of territory being, okay, France, here you go, thank you for trying to help us. Unfortunately, we lost, so because you were our ally, you lost too as well. So Spain had to give up Florida down here. England said, you picked the wrong side to help, we want Florida in particular. So Spain had to give it up. So that's why England got such a huge chunk of land after this, was because they won against the French and they won against the Spanish. Against the Spanish basically picked the losing side, to be honest.
Question.
Alright, so Russia's dipping up here. Now keep in mind, what is this water over here? Who remembers from geography probably? Alright.
Bering Strait.
So what country is this?
Russia.
Russia. So at least it makes sense that Russia's going, hey, tip, as they're coming over. We eventually have 4 countries start claiming this section of the United States. But again, this is at least makes sense why Russia is starting to claim and starting to dib land over there. So they're coming over a little bit of a different route, but they're coming over and dibbing up in this section. Okay.
So basically, the countries don't even care where the land is, they just want it.
They just want land. That's because remember, land equals wealth because you can get the lumber, you can get fur, you can trade. So they're basically just going around dibs. Mine. This is my section of land. This is one reason why you have people claiming like the Sahara Desert. You can't even use the Sahara Desert for anything, but there are whole countries in Africa going, mine. In case we ever figure out a use for the sand, mine. This is mine. I did all of this. And so that's how you have huge chunks of Africa that are claimed by poor countries, that are just dipping, this is my section of sand dune, just in case for the future. Just making sure that we're aware. Okay.
There's actually a huge use for sand.
Yeah, there is, but they just don't use it. Alright.
I thought Louisiana was bought from Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, well,
So
we'll
why
talk.
is it in Spain's territory right now?
It's Spain's right now. Now, in world history, they also go through their own conquests with Napoleon and stuff for it. So we'll talk more as we get into it.
Yeah.
Why this section of land gets changed hands again? Because this isn't the only war that happens in Europe. So we're just focusing on, okay, what are the major wars that affect us for right now? But you're right that yes, France does get to reclaim that section of land later, and we buy it from Napoleon later. But it's just for right now, it's officially Spanish's, and we'll talk about it right. Alright, so we noticed that there were several fundamental differences between Americans and Englishmen after this war. So there was a spiritual difference. We already talked this with your homework, but what was the major spiritual difference? Brecken. What's the major spiritual difference between Americans and Englishmen? So we're both basically Protestant, but what was happening to where Americans realizing, I'm different from my English cousins across the sea.
More freedom.
Technically, yes, we could have more freedom in the United States, but there's a better answer than that. Alright, anyone else know what's the better answer?
Resource.
Raise your hand. First, spiritual.
Oh, for spiritual?
Spiritual, specifically, spiritual differences.
More for more spiritual stuff.
Alright, so just make a note that the revivals lasted longer in America and they had more widespread influence. Make a note of that. It's that like second line underneath it. So the Wesleyan or the Great Awakening revivals has strengthened much of England, but the American revivals were more widespread and their influence lasted longer. So they're realizing, okay, our revival is lasting longer than theirs. So there's just a little bit of that spiritual awareness is a little bit different. Alright, military differences. So the British came over and helped us fight, but at the same time, we didn't really like how the British fought. Why were Americans much more excited? Well, I guess not excited, but they were much more dedicated in fighting. Okay.
Because they fought for like their country, their homes, and the British fought for like money.
So the British soldiers that came over, they were getting paid to fight. The Americans said, this is my backyard, we're fighting because we're defending my territory. My family's over there, we're defending this. So that's how come a lot of the Americans were a lot more determined, and they were kind of disappointed that, the British, they're just here just to get paid. They don't really care about us that much. So that's the reason why Americans said, okay, we're much more dedicated because this is my home. This isn't just the territory we're defending. No, this is my home in my area. Alright, last one, economic differences. What was the major differences between them? Alright, Ethan.
Europeans returning from American markets, they had never seen so many well-fed, healthy people as they observed in the colonies.
Oh yeah, so why is it better economically, like for money-wise, if you
Because-
have a people group that are healthier?
Because of America's protective agricultural system. the colonists never experienced famine.
Keep going.
The health of the colonists was later on an important factor in America's war for independence. People who are physically healthy have the energy to undertake greater tasks.
There you go. That was it. All right. So people who are physically healthy have the energy to undertake great tasks or to endure and fight. Since Americans could grow their own food, since they had land over in the New England area and in the American colonies, that they could grow their own food. So it wasn't like that they'd ever experienced a starvation or food shortages like they did in England. Remember, not everyone in England owned land. So a lot of the soldiers said, the Americans are healthy. They can eat fruits and vegetables, and they can get their food, and because of that, they can endure and be a stronger individual. So that's why economically, because Americans were healthier, they could keep going longer than the British. All right, you have a question, Genesis? What's your question?
So on that map, does that mean that whole green part is Texas?
Okay, I think they're saying that this is the Louisiana Purchase area. This is the Texas area. Now, Texas, they do increase its size because they just refer to kind of all of it as Texas. So I think it's this whole loosely section down in here is the loose boundaries of it. Alright. Anyone have questions about this chapter? Because we're finishing up this chapter today. Yes.
What's the extra brown part there?
This one from Russia?
The unmarked part.
I think this is just unclaimed. People haven't made it that far out there. Because keep in mind, what's the mountain range up in here that's kind of sloping down?
Is it been up or down?
Maybe Rocky. So because of that, that's gonna be noticed. We're gonna all stop at the same area because it's the Rocky Mountains, and Rocky Mountains are hard to get across. So it's one of those people go maybe. I don't know. Turn around, and go back. Maybe not. Maybe I don't want to go that direction right now.
Okay. So Louisiana, Texas, and Florida, and Alaska are the only states now that exist at this point.
Well, I mean, you can talk about the English colonies, like Georgia, 1733 to officially they're not considered official states till later because they come in and they have to submit a state constitution and get it approved and voted and stuff. So, but that territory is Louisiana, Texas, and Alaska. I guess are named territories. If you want to call it that.
Aliens.
All right, and what?
Aliens.
Yeah.
Territory aliens.
Moving on. Alright, chapter 5. So getting into it, conflict with Great Britain. So what was happening to make us go to war against England, or technically England declared war on us first. We'll talk about why and so forth later on. So do make a note for French and Indian War. Make a note up here that this is whenever the French and Indian War happened first, but then events happened kind of quickly, pretty much right after that, getting us ready for independence and getting ready for us to start to go to war against our founding country. Alright, we talked about the changing economic policies. Originally, before 1700, England had a laissez-faire or hands-off policy. Mark that. Basically, England said, if you want to go over onto the New World, okay, fine. Good luck. Do what you want to do. Figure it out yourself. You'll be fine. Hope you survive. So England didn't really care a whole lot about the American colonies. They basically said, do you want to go? Have fun. Do whatever you want over there. In the 1700s, though, they started developing a new philosophy. England was turning into a major world power at this point, so they were trying to generate massive wealth for themselves. They also had a huge territory of land at the end of the French and Indian War, so they were basically saying, we have arrived. We now want to be an empire as a nation. So they start switching gears and saying, you know those colonies we ignored for so long? How can we get money from those colonies? What can we do to benefit us as a nation? So they start shifting gears and they start switching over to the mercantile theory of economics. Do make a note of this, which is the belief that the real measure of a nation's wealth was in her gold and silver, how much physical money she possessed. We don't use this theory of economics today, but for back then, it was basically the idea of you want to generate as much money as possible for your mother country or the founding country. So she didn't really care what happened to America. She just said, I want as much wealth as possible, so I'm going to pass laws and acts to try to help me get as much wealth as possible for it. There were several acts that were passed in this time period. Make sure you follow along, Chris. There are several acts that were passed during this time period to basically increase revenue or increase money for the mother country. There are two acts, they have two different dates. There's one reason why you have to note the dates for them because they are two different. I'm not going to write them on the board, but just make a note that you have the Navigation Act of 1660 and the Navigation Act of 1663. So those are the two different Navigation Acts. Mark them in your book. This is to basically generate wealth for the merchants and people over in Britain specifically. So the Navigation Act of 1660. This said that any of the imported goods going to the colonies, from the colonies to somewhere else, have to be carried on a ship owned by a British subject, and 3/4 of the ship's crew has to be British. Now, you might think, well, that sounds racist. Yes, it was. Because the idea was, okay, you should be hiring British people to transport your goods, and it has to be a British ship to transport it. Basically, they were wanting you to hire the British people and not hire another nation's people that would do it for cheaper. They're trying to make sure that the wealth is kept only in the British Empire and not going to other nations. The Navigation Act of 1663, this said that European products headed to the colonies had to be routed through England first and then sold to the colonies. So it's basically given a monopoly to England. Anyone know what a monopoly is? Not the board game. Like, anyone know what that is economically? Okay.
You have full control over a category of real estate or a category of business.
Yeah. Yeah, or goods. So that's the idea of and they're saying, okay, anything leaving the colony has to be on British ships and it has to be transported by British people. Anything coming to the colony has to be sold to England first, and then England will ship it to the United States. So it's basically giving England and the merchants there a monopoly. They determine what goods go to the United States and what goods are coming from it. So they're giving England a monopoly. We couldn't just go trade with, say, Spain anymore. We had to go put it on ships and route it to England first for it. So because of that, it was to give British merchants a monopoly on colonial import, and then also basically penalize us for trying to trade with other nations. Alright, anyone have any questions about those two acts? So you have to note the dates of them though, because that's the only difference between them. Okay.
Monopolies are illegal now, right?
Officially, yes, but we still have extremely large businesses like Disney that feels like they're basically a monopoly over like the entertainment industry, because Disney just buys up basically other companies that start trying to like do well with them. So it's one of those. Officially, you're not supposed to have them, but some companies seem like that they kind of just become convenient loopholes around it. Wait, raise your hand. Okay, what is it?
Disney's gonna take over everything.
It feels like it. Some days it really does. Okay, we gotta keep going though. Alright, so the Molasses Act. Parliament passed the Molasses Act. This tax raw sugar, rum, and molasses, that's where the name comes from, imported into the colonies from the non-British West Indies. There was British territories in the West Indies, and then there was the non-British owned West Indies. They were basically putting a tax on the molasses, rum, and sugar coming from the West Indies that the British did not own. Alright, if you put a tax on something, what do those people have to do to make up the tax? Reckon. Yeah, okay, let's say that I'm coming from England and I'm selling a bag of sugar. This is my bag of sugar. Now, let's say somebody, we're gonna say Ethan, he's coming from somewhere else besides Great Britain, and he's trying to sell his bag of sugar. But since he is not English, he gets a tax put on his. He has to pay $3 to come sell sugar in the American colonies. So can they charge the same price then to sell their bag of sugar? Why? What does Ethan have to do? Yeah, he's gonna have to charge more. So if this bag of sugar was only $6, then Ethan, if he wants to make $6, how much does he have to charge?
$8.
$9.
Oh.
It's okay. It's late. It's not math class. So you have to charge $9. Now, if you are a person and you want to save as much money as possible, and the bags of sugar are basically the same, which bag of sugar would you probably buy? Genesis?
Yours.
Yeah, you'll probably buy this one because it's cheaper. They're basically the exact same thing. So that's what they were doing. They're basically punishing other people for trying to sell in the colonies because they're basically making the English products automatically cheaper. Eventually the colonists go, we're going to buy this because it's the principle, and I'm going to buy it from somebody else because I can. But that comes a little bit later. But that's the idea. That's the reason why they're putting taxes on other countries' goods coming into America, because it raises their prices, so that way the British prices are automatically cheaper. Alright, industrial regulation. Your book also points out as well that British manufacturing, they were angry because the Americans were making products with manufacturing like manufactured goods, and we started to basically compete with the British over in England. And the British said, no, we don't like that. Americans, they shouldn't be making that stuff. We're making that stuff first, and we want to sell it. So Parliament was actually passing laws saying, where you could and could not make certain products. So your book points out the Hat Act, the Iron Act, the Woolens Act. These are basically saying that saying that you could sell these items in your colony, and that was it. You couldn't go sell it in another colony. The hat one, because I looked this one up, if you were a hat maker and you lived in Virginia, you could not go to Massachusetts and sell your hat. That was illegal. You had to stay in Virginia. Because the British because the British over in England were selling hats in Massachusetts. You had to stay in your section of the country. So again, that's part of the reason why American colonists don't like it, because they're getting too meddlesome. Alright, one of the important kind of boards that was established was the Board of Trade. Mark that one. It had the power to annul laws passed by the colonial legislators, to hear appeals from the colonists, to influence trade colonies. Now, this Board of Trade, in some cases, they would pass laws to benefit the Americans. Like they said that, okay, because tobacco grows so well in America, only the Americans can grow tobacco to ship back to England. Nobody in England should even try it, because it doesn't grow well over there. So it's illegal. You guys cannot grow tobacco in England. Only the Americans can. But that was just besides the point. It wasn't the idea of they were trying to help out Americans. They just said it's convenient and thus for the mother country, for England, if America doesn't. Alright, so just make a note that the Board of Trade, that one had the most power over our trade laws. This is also leading to increase political regulation as well, because they're passing laws, and we didn't feel like we were properly represented in Parliament. We felt like that, no, we want you to be able to have representation. We're too different, the Americans felt like at this point, to where we should have proper representation. Alright, so several effects of the French and Indian War that helped us out. One of the major ones, we gained valuable experience in self-defense. Mark that. Now remember, who was a general that did not die in the French and Indian War, and that we talked about, that becomes a great leader for us later on. So, hand tell me, Joseph?
Washington.
George Washington, so he did not die, and he gained valuable experience in basically learning how to fight in the American territory. So again, other leaders as well. Your book is focused on George Washington because again, your book's already huge, so it has to pick super important people. Next page. One of the other major ones, it made us less dependent on Great Britain for protection, because since the French were gone, now the Native Americans were still here, and there was strife with the Native Americans, but we were less dependent on the British to protect us from the French. Alright, now Britain faced several problems because of the French and Indian War, or 7-Year War as they called it. There were two major problems. One of the first ones was Britain. They had a defense problem because the Native Americans were still here, and if they were going to be serious about protecting the colonies, it would take thousands of British troops to basically protect the entire edge of our colonies. So to protect the entire boundary. The British knew this would take a lot of troops, and that's extensive. So they were saying, okay, that's going to be extremely costly. Also, they had a heavy war debt. Now, they did get all of the land, but that still doesn't balance out how much they spent to be involved in the French and Indian War. Also, keep in mind there were 4 other wars previously that they fought against France. So they had a heavy war debt. And so just because of that, they had several problems. I'm not done. Keep it open. So they had finances and they had a defense problem. All right. Other inflammatory circumstances. So there were several things that also happened that the Parliament passed that basically angered the colonists. One of the major ones was the writs of the I skipped Pontiac and Pontiac's conspiracy. Make note of him that he was an Indian chief. He led a bloody uprising, and it showed the British that if they were to take this seriously, it would take thousands of troops to actually defend it. So Pontiac and Pontiac's conspiracy. Just make a note of that. Alright, right to assist. Do make a note of what they are. These writs are basically general search warrants to where the government authorities could look for basically any type of contraband that were smuggled into the colonies. They could just go to your house and just start looking. Now, the Americans said, this is a breach of privacy. We don't like this. This is one reason why we specifically put in the Bill of Rights you can't do this later on, because this angered us. Now I'm done. Now you can put it away. Alright, you don't have any homework because it is Wednesday and to get you ready for soul winning, even though soul winning is not happening today. But that's one of the reasons why we don't do it. Keep in mind, editorial. Alright, so thinking back over it, what is the hands-off economic policy that Britain established previous to this time period? Chris? What's the Latin word that means hands-off policy? They did this to us previously before 1700s. They basically say, Do what you want, America. Good luck.
What's the start?
L.
Hold this L.
It's L something. Okay. Yep, laissez-faire. It's basically hands-off
Laissez-faire.
politics. Alright, what was the new theory that they were establishing in this time period? Ethan?
Depression.
No. But it's basically, you exist for the good to generate money for the mother country. Do you remember what that's called? Starts with an M. Part of homework. Second, help me out. Ah! Alright, Chris, you know?
Merlin?
Close. Mercantile.
Mercantilism.
Mercantile
I know that.
theory. Alright. What was the Treaty of Paris that basically ended the French and Indian War? So it's Treaty of Paris of what year?
1763.
Good job. Alright, have a good day. Chris,